The following is a Comfortably Zoned Radio Network production.
Welcome off for the Cyber Convention.
Thank you, Tally Olson. We are back. Loving baseball when we were 12 and innocent. Well, maybe not all that innocent, says David Hubler of the Bronx. He's here. Hal Bock is here. George Case III is here. And Alan Blumkin is here. And they all love the topic and remember vividly what was going on in their lives at 12, and in particular, baseball for them at 12. So I'd like to give you all an equal opportunity. If I feel we're going over, we'll make it 2 shows, and I'll push a button. But let's start with Hal Bock, Associated Press, and really, Heshy Bock.
That's me.
What do you say, Hal?
I was 12 a long time ago, but I remember it well. That was the year 1951, and I was a Giants fan. My father was a Giants fan. He said, "You're a Giants fan." I said, "Okay, Pop, that's what we'll do." And I was a Giants fan, and it was a great, great summer. It was a chase all summer. The Giants fell 13 and a half games behind in August, and they launched a tremendous drive to the end of the season. They went 37-7 down the stretch, and they caught the Dodgers, and they had a 3-game playoff. And the first game was played in Ebbets Field, and the Giants won it. And they were going home, and all they had to do was win one at home, and I was sitting pretty, 12 years old.
Oh,
they come home, nice. And Clem Labine pitched the second game for the Dodgers. He was ordinarily a relief pitcher, but they made him a starter for that game, and he shut the Giants out 10-0. So now it goes to a third game, winner take all. And I was in junior high school at the time and raced to get home in time to hear the end of the game. And I knew when I walked in the door that things were not going well. They were losing 4-1 in the 9th inning. And my father was listening to the game on the radio in the kitchen, and I would not go in there. I was so angry because this had been a whole summer that I had devoted to this team, and they were going to blow it. And I was so angry. And I sat down in a big easy chair and started looking at the newspaper. And I could hear in a distance this rally that the Giants launched. Alvin Dark got a hit. Don Mueller got a hit. And I knew that it was 4-2, and I knew that Bobby Thompson was up. And I was scared to do anything to move. I thought if by sitting in this chair, I was helping them rally. And I was a very superstitious kid. And I wasn't going to move until whatever happened, happened. And while I was sitting there, I heard Russ Hodges scream, "The Giants win the pennant, the Giants win the pennant." And I jumped up and ran into the kitchen where my dad was, and we jumped into each other's arms and we started dancing around the kitchen, laughing and crying and screaming, and just, it was the happiest day of my life until the day I got married and the day my wife gave birth to our son. Those are the 3 greatest days of my life. And
wow.
It was a wonderful, wonderful moment. I will never forget it.
Nice. We'll get back to you, Hal. George Case III, baseball family. At age 12, baseball was your thing, I'll bet. George.
Yeah, I would like to talk a little bit about it. And, first of all, Hal, I really enjoyed your story. I can remember, the specifics of that. I was not a Giants or Dodgers fan living in the Philadelphia area, but I certainly know the circumstances. And that was a great time for anybody who was a Giants fan with, Bobby Thompson with a hit, shot heard around the world. When I was 12, I was playing Little League Baseball, and my first year playing Little League Baseball was when I was 11. I happened to be big and was selected on a couple All-Star teams and was captain of my Little League All-Star team and pitched our first game when I was 12 and, got the headlines in the paper and not about me per se. It said, Case's, I have the clipping. It said, Case's son ace in little game. So I was being compared to my dad at age 12, and that used to really bother my father because he used to always say, why do people try to compare you to me? You're only 12 years old. That's crazy. But,
hey, let me interrupt
baseball was my life, so I really literally grew up in it.
Well, it wasn't always easy being you. And why don't you, in particular, your dad was the fastest guy in the American League. He was a super major leaguer. He wasn't a Hall of Famer, but he was a terrific major leaguer. And you're playing in the Little League. You've told this story for me once or twice, but it's indicative of how life is. Tell me how you reacted when you heard the words out of a fan, and tell me how your dad reacted when you heard heckling at 12 years old from a fan.
Well, Ralph, I appreciate you bringing that up because it was a little bit of a traumatic experience. I mean, hey, as a young kid, I was out there playing and loved to play, had talent, was excited to be wearing a Little League uniform. We had a wonderful stadium with dugouts and fences and scorecards, scorebooks. We had electronic scoreboard in center field, and it was really, you almost felt like you were a professional ball player. It was a grass infield. It was terrific. But here I am, I'm playing, and, my dad came to a game, and a fan says, hollers at me, says, Case, you'll never be as good as your old man. And, that really, I guess, had an effect on me because I came home, and after the game I was crying, and my dad, put his arm around me. He said, hey, I love you. I don't understand how people could say that kind of stuff, but don't worry about it. To be compared to me, you being a 12-year-old and me being a Major League ball player is ridiculous. So I really appreciate that. And my dad always, was proud of me because I was an athlete. I did play, but I did have the same name. So that was something I had to overcome. So no matter where I was, if I was playing Little League or high school, American Legion, whatever, a lot of times I was George Case Jr., and actually I was George Case III. My dad was a junior. So I had to, I played the same sport in the same area that my dad did. So, the comparisons, I guess, were always going to be there. But, I learned to overcome them over the years. And the fact that I was able to play myself was a real, help to me to handle some of the criticisms on the field.
Well, hearing your story way back when we first got together doing podcasts, had such an influence on me. Like, what is it that people could do to prove their stupidity more than that? It's like that person, whoever he or she is, wasn't the only person that thought in those terms, and not about you, but about the world. I don't know how they live with themselves, and it was toxic. Let's put it that way.
Ralph, I appreciate you saying that. It's something that, as you get older, you learn it. You learn to overcome it. You try to block the criticisms out. Major League ball players today, fans are hollering at them all the time. I remember my dad telling me a story one time that, a fan was really after him in some game and called him some kind of names or maybe mentioned my mother's name or something, and my dad went right in the stands after the guy. So, that's something that happens. I never had that happen to me personally. I was able to handle if somebody made a caustic remark about myself, but, I knew that I had some talent, and I was a young kid playing ball because I loved it. And the fact that my dad was a ball player gave me a tremendous advantage because I can remember never even learning how to play. Somehow, instinctively, I knew how to play. And maybe it was just being around my father and hearing the stories and the conversations, but the game became very, very easy to me. And I wish today I'd worked harder. Maybe I could have done more professionally, but I didn't because it came so easy. So I never went to a gym, never took batting practice other than when before a game. I used to stand in front of a mirror once in a while and look at my swing. Have a catch in the backyard with my dad. He'd give me some tips and that kind of thing. But basically, that was it. I played baseball because I loved the game.
George, let me say something. When you told the story a minute ago about your dad going into the stands, my first reaction was, I didn't know your dad, of course, but other than through you, my first reaction was, that's out of character. And then I thought to myself again, no, that's in character. Am I right?
Well, yeah, Ralph, you are. I mean, my father was very, very competitive, but very mild-mannered. And I have to think if he went into the stands, it was because somebody said something derogatory. I would have to think about maybe my mother or maybe, my dad, but I don't know. But he would never have gone in the stands if somebody really hadn't, right, mouthed off. Because he believed that a ball player should, play the game, try to block out all the distractions and play. And you're going to have good games, you're going to have bad games. That's just being a human being. So, I remember, I think I might have here's another example. I told a story. I was maybe 5 or 6 years old. I used to listen to the game at night on the radio if they were playing a night game, and I had to be in bed. And I remember, my dad had a bad game. I fell asleep listening to the radio in my bed. My father comes home after the ball game, tucks me in, gives me a kiss goodnight. I look up and said, Daddy, you really stunk tonight. So he got a huge laugh about that, told that story many, many times. And, that's the kind of person he was. He was a great athlete, but he was a human being, and he appreciated the fact that he had such a good life and a good family, outside of baseball.
Yeah. Hey, real quick, tell me about the Jesse Owens race. How that came about.
Well, that was another little episode, Ralph. My father had the reputation of being the fastest man in baseball. Jesse Owens, of course, the reputation as being the world's fastest human based upon his Olympic performance in 1936. But Bill Veeck had taken over as the owner of the Cleveland Ball Club in 46 when my dad was there. And he had arranged for a race because Bill loved to promote. So he promoted, the world's fastest human against the baseball's fastest player. So it was a 100-yard dash. Jesse beat my dad by a tenth of a second, and it was a very good race. And Jesse told me afterwards, I met him in '61. He was speaking at Rutgers University where I was a student. And after his little talk, I went down to him and I said, Jesse, I just want to introduce myself. I'm George Case's son. And he sat me down, put his arm around me. He said, man, I'm so happy to meet you. He said, your dad was so competitive. He said, after we raced, he said, come on, Jesse, let's race around the bases. And he said, I told your father, I said, George, I only run in a straight line. You're the best in the world at running the bases.
Oh, wow. What a story. I didn't realize until now how competitive your dad was. I thought it was just because he comes off from you as being mild-mannered and stuff.
Yes.
You don't talk about the competitive.
He was very mild-mannered, but when he was on the field, no matter whether he was playing or coaching or managing or whatever, I mean, he was there to win. And I think that's what an athlete, if you talk to a lot of athletes and they're talking about missing there all the time as a player in the locker room or whatever, but so many of them they're just great competitors and they love to compete. And my dad loved to win, but he was realistic, and he used to tell me after I had a bad game or had a loss or whatever, he'd say, hey, there's always tomorrow. You'll be all right. No problem. We can't win them all. And that's just the way he was.
Right. You win some, lose some get rained out.
Exactly. Yep.
All right. Alan Blumkin, how are you tonight?
Okay, I'm very glad to...
Wait one second. I just want to say, you guys were saying about Hal's story. I'm not... you were saying you weren't a Giant fan. Well, I was. And every time I hear that story from Hal or any reference to the Polo Grounds, to the writers' press box that you looked up at as a little kid, Hal, I'm telling you, I get absolute goosebumps from that. And
I'm glad I make that happy for you.
And you know what? It makes George's story gives me goosebumps too, because as I've told him, my mother was at the 1939 Lou Gehrig speech, and my mother, and as was your dad, lined up, so I know she saw him, and he was coaching third base in 1961 for the Senators or Nats, what were they called? The expansion team.
Yeah, they were called the Senators at that time, right?
Okay, yep. Well, we took a family trip and saw the Senators play and the Yankees in '61. And I remember it for two reasons. The Yankees were the best team of my era. The '61 team with Maris and Mantle and Blanchard and those guys, and Howard Yogi hitting 20 home runs. That was a great team. So I remember it, and I remember the story of the cab driver that took us to the ballpark from the hotel. He goes, "They're like a machine, the Yankees. A machine, I tell you." His words resonate. But my mom saw your dad twice, didn't know from baseball in particular, but I think that's a tremendous coincidence. So thank you, Hal. I'm going to switch it to Alan Blumkin. You're age 12, Alan.
Okay, I was 12. I became 12 in May of 1955, and I was a huge Yankee fan at that point. And on the contrary, where I grew up in Belrose, Queens, nobody was born there. No kid my age was born there. Everybody was from either the Bronx or Brooklyn. Right. So the kids from the Bronx, like me, rooted for the Yankees. The kids from Brooklyn rooted for the Dodgers. And I got to hate the Dodgers. I hated Jackie Robinson. I hated Roy Campanella. I hated Don Newcomb, not because they were black, but because they were Dodgers.
Right.
And the Dodgers got off to a tremendous start in 1955. The Yankees were involved in what turned out to be a pretty tight race for most of the season. And unfortunately, in the summer of 1955, that was the second of my four summers being spent at the sleepaway camp, where you couldn't watch television, and you were lucky if you found you never saw a newspaper, so it was pretty hard to keep up with it.
Yeah.
So I got back from camp at the end of August, and before school started, I was living, Queens, and me and this friend of mine were 12 years old. They were playing. The Yankees were playing a day game against Kansas City, And my friend and I took a bus and 2 trains by ourselves up to Yankee Stadium, saw the game. Whitey Ford pitched the one-hitter against the A's. He carried a no-hitter into the 7th inning. They gave up a double to a A's player named Jim Finnegan, and the Yankees won the game anyway. And the Yankees won, I think, by 3 games over Cleveland that year. And the White Sox and Red Sox were also in the race. So they, in those days, of course, there were no playoffs or anything like that. So they played the Dodgers in the World Series. So I had to go to school. I was in the 7th grade. I had to go to school during the during the World Series games. So when it came to Game 7, and also at that point I was also having to go to Hebrew school 4 days a week, which I hated. This was on top of regular school. And so I come home to the top of the 9th inning of Game 7. And the Yankees come up trailing 2-0 in the bottom of the 9th inning. I knew what the score was, and I watched the bottom of the 9th. And then as I'm watching this, and they make the last out, I'm pounding the sofa. I said, "This can't be real. This can't be real. This can't be real." Because I was used to the Yankees, as reliable as death and taxes, and the sun setting in the East. The Yankees winning World Series. That didn't happen.
Right.
So it was very disappointing for me. But in '56, we got revenge.
Let me ask you, Al, it's unlikely that your dad had anything to do with you being a baseball fan.
No, nothing. I got into it through when I was 8 years old in 1951. Started to buy the cards. That's how I got into it.
Okay. Now, you people don't know this. You memorized the number of every card in 1952.
I memorized the whole 1952 top set.
Well,
I tried to with other sets, but that just won't come, and I don't think I have the core storage for that.
Okay. Neither the tops. They had to throw away a lot of cards.
Yeah, what happened is that they put out this high number, 97 cards. The 311 card, from 311 to 407. The 311 is the mantle. That's worth a couple $1 million now in top-notch condition. And what happened is I never really saw them until the Topps reprinted them in 1983. What happened was that they came out so late that the kids were either in camp or on vacation somewhere for the summer, and when they kept them in the Topps warehouse, which is on the other side of the Gowanus River, this side of the Gowanus River, excuse me. And they didn't have enough room for the new cards. They dumped a ton of them into the Gowanus Canal.
Wow.
And that's what made them scarce. So right now, even the stiffs, and there's a lot of there are Hall of Famers in that series, but there are a lot of stiffs in that series. The average stiff goes for close to $200.
Whoa.
Mm. You've got Mantle, you've got Bobby Thompson, you got Jackie Robinson, Roy Campanello, Leo DeRocha, Pee Wee Reese, Hoyt Wilhelm, and the last card was another 1952 rookie by the name of Eddie Matthews.
Wow. Now, Hoyt Wilhelm, what's the story about him? His first major league at bat.
Yeah, he had a home run. He never hit one after that.
All right. I have never been able to stump Alan on any trivia question.
He pitched for 20 years. He was 29 years old when he came up in 1952. He was still pitching in 1971 when he was 49.
Incredible. David Hubler, you're next, and you're going to take us out. Let me ask you, David, for your Charlie Silvera story. Were you about 12 at that time?
Yeah, I was around 12. I got to my first game in '51 when DiMaggio was last year, and I remember we were sitting in the upper deck behind home plate, and first of all, I had never seen a major league game before, and I also had never seen. I'd seen a couple on TV. We didn't have a TV until late because it would affect my eyes. That was the story. You know, if you watched too much TV, you went to the movies, you'd have trouble, eye trouble. Anyway, so we got in there to Yankee Stadium, and it was just absolutely enormous. It was the largest thing I'd ever seen in my life. And my father pointed out, so that's out there, that's center field. That's where Joe DiMaggio plays. And of course, he did, and I know he didn't mention this because I think I would have remembered it several years later, but in right field was the rookie Mickey Mantle playing. But the point was that it was just the most awesome place I think I'd ever seen. A number of years later, when I was going regularly on my own or with my best friend Stan, we would take advantage of that wonderful. That should be a baseball tradition. For kids, it was spectacular. They would let you walk out through the center field gates, and so you could walk out, not on the infield. The guards, the ushers rather, would line up on the first and third base in their red coats and line up in the first and third. But behind that, once the infield dirt was passed, you could walk out on the outfield grass and exit through the center field bleachers exits. And so you got the opportunity to stand there because nobody was going to push you around. There were just people moving around to get out. But you had the opportunity to actually stand there where Mantle stood, where DiMaggio stood, and see the awesome size of this place. You can't really realize how large that ball field was until you stood out in center field. And you couldn't believe, as kids, how anyone could ever catch a ball out there because you could barely see home plate from there. So then we used to go quite regularly. The Silvera story came about at the time when I was 12 or 13, and what we would do, we were on the elevated subway line that took us straight to Yankee Stadium. So we could be down there in about 20 minutes. And with the way the subway fares worked in those days, you could get a pass to take the bus out from Yankee Stadium, but you could also go on the subway. The point was that you could take the elevated line down to Yankee Stadium and the IMD Independent Underground line back, all for the same 15-cent fare if you took the little transfer ticket before you went into the stadium. So for 15 cents, you got to see 2 or 3 innings, and you hoped maybe for an extra inning game. And we did that a lot. And so we were at Yankee Stadium very, very often in those days. And it was like our afternoon activity. The Silvera story came about because now they're not doing this much anymore, as far as I can tell. This batting and infield practice before the game. The games I've gone to over the last couple of years in Washington, and I think in Baltimore it was pretty much like that too. There was some batting practice, but there wasn't much infield practice. Anyway, so and it was early in the afternoon, and the Yankees are out there practicing and warming up and playing a little one-a-cat and things like that. And Charlie Silvera was walking out too. He was the Yankees' long-time second, substitute catcher. Beating behind Yogi Berra was probably the the best and the worst job in baseball, because you would win every year, you get a World Series year, and of course, as a ball player, you wanted to play. But if you couldn't play because Yogi Berra was in front of you, you still shared in all the loot. And so Silvera's standing there, and I go down to the edge of the box seats. There's a railing there. I can't get on the field. There's a railing there. And I called him Mr. Silvera, and I asked him, I said, can you give me a baseball? And the reason I said that is because, and it holds true today, never in all of the games I've ever gone to, no matter what stadium it's with, I've never got a foul ball, much less a home run ball. So I was thinking, even if he would give me one, I could come home with a baseball. No. So he looked at me and said, "Kid," he said, "if you go to someone's house for dinner, do you have to take the silverware home?" So that was a no. That was a polite no.
I'll bet the Yankees were very cheap about foul balls and what have you.
Well, in those days, they didn't really give them away like they do now. I mean, as soon as there's a smudge on the ball, they toss it out. And the closest I ever came to getting a souvenir was a Cal Neiman bat. He was playing, I think, for Chicago, and he cracked the bat. The visiting bat boy was a kid I knew from high school, and he went and he held the bat for me till after the game was over. And I went and he handed it to me, and some other kids started to wrestle with me for the bat, but I wound up getting it. Now, it was cracked. You couldn't use it at all, but it was the only souvenir I've ever gotten from a Major League Baseball game, that I didn't have to pay for as a real souvenir. But those are wonderful, wonderful days. I can go back to 49 when we had just little radio on the windowsill to boost reception, and we listened. My parents, my grandmother, she listened to Yankee games in her apartment, and I mean it was just an all Yankees apartment building, with the exception of one family who were avid Dodgers fans, and they actually wound up running the Jackie Robinson project at George Washington University, and they knew Rachel quite well.
Wow!
That's just, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Can I tell one quick story, please?
Please.
No.
Okay. First of all, David, I agree with you. My first game was on September 12th, 1953. My parents reluctantly took me and my brother. And the first time I saw the green grass and the vastness of it, and hearing Bob Shepard, do the PA, right. And it was just a miracle. And you were right; they did let us go around. Anyway, this quick story. In 1957, I'm 14 years old, and in June 1957, they were playing a Sunday doubleheader with the White Sox. Which was a sellout because the White Sox were challenging for them first place at that point. So my friend and I go up there, and we see the line for the grandstand is 10 miles long. So we're 14 years old, we have maybe $5 in our pocket. We decided to be adventurous. We bought 2 obstructed view in the loge behind home plate. So the first 5 innings, we sat in looking through on the sides of the poles, and then we noticed in the row behind us there were a couple of empty seats. So they said, "We'll go there if they, people come, we'll go back to the original seats." They never showed up.
Oh, so you got to sit there the whole game. Hey, Alan.
That was terrific.
You mentioned Bob Shepard. Did he sound something like this? Nobody.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Number 7, Helen Blumkin.
Yeah.
Number 7.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, he did.
He always said that he loved Mickey Mantle's name because it just rolled off his tongue. And Derek Jeter had, made a type of him, and after Bob Shepard passed away, he was like 98 when he passed away. They played the Bob Shepard type of Jeter every time Jeter came up until he retired after 2014.
Hey, the Yankees were in town the day of Bob Shepard's funeral, and there was an off day, and Jeter didn't go to that funeral. Just thought I'd mention that. I love the sound of
about Bob Shepard. For many years, his job was made simple because in those days they only announced the starting lineups the first time around, and then after that it was only when a pinch hitter came in or a replacement pitcher. They didn't announce the batter each time around as they do now. So Shepard, after he went through number 9, he could sit back and relax until.
Very interesting. I remember that, but I hadn't thought of it in a long time. Let's go around the horn. Anybody leave anything out that you wanted to say on this show? Hal Bock.
What I wanted to say was that when I was 12 years old, it was the best summer of my life. Each game, each day, it was like a soap opera, and it was so memorable. It's etched in my memory forever.
And I'll bet that soap opera was indicative of the day-to-day workings of a beat writer like yourself. You got into the rhythm of it from that.
That's what I always wanted to do, and I was one of these fortunate people who got to do what he wanted to do. So I'm forever grateful for that. But that passion, if you want to call it that, was planted in the summer of 1951.
Hey, Hal, I'm going to ask all you guys this now that you mentioned it. If it weren't for baseball or sports, what would be your passion, starting with Hal?
I always liked history. I always loved history. I minored in history in college. I also minored in English. And I was always fascinated by what came before we got here, which is something that most people today don't care about. But I loved history. I was passionate about history.
Okay. Alan Blumkin. So
I agree with Hal. I was passionate about certain areas of history. I've read a tremendous number of books on the historical eras and that I'm interested in. And my other passion is classic movies.
Beautiful. George Case III.
Well, I'm sort of in agreement with both Alan and Hal. I always loved history, social studies. I was terrible in math, so that was not going to be a profession for me, but I did like history and social studies very much. Went to Rutgers, and my degree was in political science, so that at one time was a possibility. I was thinking about law school. However, I wound up in a business career which was so aligned to my baseball background. I was in the athletic footwear business and had a 35-year career in that field. So I was very close to sports my entire life and was able to, make a nice business career out of my involvement with sports.
And you have wonderful stories and just a great passion for baseball. David Hubler, take us out. What was if it weren't for sports, baseball in particular, what would be your true passion?
Well, I was from early on. I was an artist and primarily a cartoonist. I did all the illustrations in the school. We used to, for holidays, they used to paint the school windows with this combination of dry powdered paint and Banami, and I did all of the windows, and I illustrated everything for the school, did the mimeograph stuff. I was heading toward a career in art, and it was only until I got into high school. Interestingly enough, I flunked our writing test to join the Clinton News, the high school newspaper, and so I joined as a staff artist. And years later, when I ran into the faculty advisor who had flunked me on the test, and I had already been working for UPI and several other writing organizations, I told him the story, and he said, well, it was a pretty rough test. So that's where I veered off from. I was never going to be a professional athlete. So baseball saved me in many, many ways because I just loved the game. One quick story, there was a fellow who lived in our neighborhood for just a couple of years. And one day we're sitting on the stoop, and he said, would you like to see something? I was there with another friend. And he went up into his apartment, and he came down with a Lou Gehrig jersey, real Lou Gehrig flannel jersey with Gehrig's name embroidered in the tail and number 4 on the back. And to us, it was like holding the Shroud of Turin. I mean, we were just awestruck. I wanted to get that in because that took place during the years we've been talking about. I never knew what happened to him. He moved away somehow. And in fact, just recently I was talking to the other friend of mine who was there, and he said, whatever happened to that guy? I don't know. He took this Lou Gehrig jersey and moved.
Wow. Great stories, guys. Thank you so much.
Ralph, I just want to mention one thing before we break up.
Please.
SABRE, the Society for American Baseball Research, is offering an online course in analytics. I'm sure all of us are going to rush to sign up for it.
Oh, yeah. How much can we pay?
They'd have to pay us.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, no thank you, Alan. I appreciate the invitation, but no.
Yeah.
We are 4, and in this case 5, we included baseball traditionalists, unbelievably so. So that may not be a good course for us. Thank you, guys. Terrific podcast. David will talk over the weekend or soon and arrange our little scheme.
Okay.
All right, my friend. Thank you all. You are the highlight of my month.
Good night, everybody.
Bye-bye.
It was great to be back together again.
Yes,
absolutely.
Okay.
Yep.
Let's not miss a month. Next month, we will go with the topic of whatever Hal Bock is writing that month. How about that?
I don't know. Who knows what I'll be writing?
That's right. That's the mystery. Tune in.
All right.
Okay.
Talk
Bye-bye.
Good night. Next month. Be well. Thank you for listening, everybody. Comfortably Zoned Radio Network. Hal Bock, Heshe, George Case III, Case, Al Blumkin, Maven. How about that off the top of my head? And David Hubler, Editor Supreme. Be well, everybody. Happy trails. Adios.
The proceeding has been a Comfortably Zoned network production. You are advised to keep your dreams wet, your humor dry, your children and grandchildren out of military recruiting offices and off the laps of clerics who wear dresses. Thank you for listening, everyone. Happy trails.